and I'm a proud Kalali, Gamilaroi, Wiradjuri and Narrabul woman. I'm an emerging filmmaker and I've dabbled in writing, directing, producing. I've also worked as crew as a clearance coordinator and art department coordinator, and I also have a bachelor's degree in acting. So in short, I'm diverse and you can hire me for a lot of different things.
Do it!
I'm excited to introduce this panel, which poses the question, is diversity for hire? And we have Rosie Lord from Unless Pictures to moderate the session. I hope you enjoy the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd also like to acknowledge the land that we're on and the Yugambeh language group of this land that we are on, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and welcome all First Nations humans who are with us today. Thank you very much for joining us. This is a very exciting and very relevant panel, an incredible panel group of humans to be talking with today. I would very much like to do a shout out to, as anyone has seen in the program, Loani Arman did all the legwork on this panel. Ridiculously talented, wonderful human. She has unfortunately had to duck off for some personal reasons, sends her apologies, but I get to come up here and play and jam. Just to frame this conversation momentarily and take a bit of a step back, this is a really complex conversation that we're having. There are no two ways about that. It's also a very vulnerable conversation, and it's a conversation that is constantly evolving. We are all working in an industry that has a long legacy, and we're all coming from communities that also have long legacies, and where they intersect at the moment is a bit crunchy. So we are going to do our best to be able to speak candidly, but with care and compassion, knowing that we are all on a journey, and that we are all, obviously everyone in this room has made the time to be here to be part of this conversation, so thank you. And we also, and looking around this room, I can see that there are a lot of people in this room who also have incredible expertise to add to the conversation as well. So whilst we're sitting here up on the stage, I absolutely would like this to be a bit of a more casual environment. I've got this appy thing. No, I don't. I have a tablet, but it's connected to your appy things. So if you have any questions that come up, please put them into the app. I believe the QR code will go up at some point. But also, if you would prefer to just speak with your mouths, then just put your hand up and we'll try and get a mic to you to ask some questions. As we're going, I think it's nicer just to be able to chat from the floor and on the stage simultaneously. So, all of that housekeeping done, I would love our incredible panelists, I can speak, to introduce themselves for me and their wonderfulness. No pressure.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Chika Ikogwe, and I am an actor and a writer.
Wait, more than that.
Oh.
Keep going.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
Chika is the star of a children's show called Mickey vs. the World on ABC, and also a writer on season 2. Am I right?
Woo, woo.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
She's also on Heartbreak High, and also the dopest bitch out. What?
Yep.
Thank you, Nina. I won't be doing the same, but thank you so much.
Can you do mine?
Brad,
Well, go for it. You probably do it better than I do. Hi, I'm Bridie. I'm also an actor and a creative because, most actors have to wear multiple hats to pay the rent. I have worked across many amazing TV shows. I'm very humbled to be able to do that. I've worked on The Heights, on Bump, Joe versus Carol, other things. I'm an undergraduate. Chika and I were in the same class. So I know Chika better than I know the back of my hand, almost. Scarily so.
you should have done her intro.
Yeah. I'm also a person with disability. I've got cerebral palsy, so you may notice that I walk with a bit of a limp. I always call it a swagger. But yeah, I'm a proud disabled woman as well. Nina.
Hello, I'm Nina Oyama. I'm a comedian and a writer and an actor. And take it away, Chika. No, I'm kidding.
And most recently can be seen on screens in Deadlock.
Oh yeah, I was on a TV show called Deadlock on Amazon, on Utopia on ABC, and I was a contestant in Taskmaster Australia. For all the TMAU nerds out there, hello. I also write for stuff. I wrote for a TV show called Koala Man, which is on Disney+. It's got Hugh Jackman in it, so you know it's good. And I made a show called Latecomers with my friend Angus Thompson and Emma Myers, and it's on SBS, and it won an ACTOR award.
Epic.
Yeah.
Oh, I should have gone before you.
I know you wanted to sit in this seat so badly. Sam's like, I'm not sitting at the middle. I can't do it. And now you stitched yourself up.
I stitched myself up. Hi, my name's Sam Leighton-Dore. I am a visual artist who works across ceramics, illustration, but predominantly at the moment animation. I studied filmmaking and have a slate of animated projects that I'm working on, one of which is in a co-production with Ludo at the moment. And yeah, very much for hire.
Amazing. And I am Rosie Lord. I am a filmmaker. I also work at Unless Pictures. We have Windcatcher going out on Stan next week, so please watch it. We want to get Windcatcher 2 up. Please get all Little Humans to watch it. I also EP'd White Fever that's going on ABC in April 10, and that is just the most extraordinary show. Ra Chapman wrote, created, stars in. Phenomenal. And I am also the chair of the Screen Australia's Gender Matters Task Force, for context. Okay, but I assume that most people understand what we're talking about when we're talking about diversity. But what I'd like to do is to put a bit of a back context. I once heard someone explain equity, inclusion and belonging in a really great way, which I think may be useful for people. The term equity often gets really confused, so I'm going to use it in a dance party setting. So if there's equality if everyone knows that the party's on, right? Everyone just knows the party's on, great. There's inclusion if you're invited to the party. You're told, come to this party, excellent. And there's belonging if the party is tailored to be able to make you feel comfortable. Your music's playing, there's some comfy couches if that's what you're after, there's like a quiet sensory room if that's what you're after, there's like some epic jungle if that's what you're after. That's where belonging starts to feel. And where we get lost with this diversity conversation in many industries, ours is not exclusive, is that people think, great, equality, everyone knows that that job's available, so you can put your application in. But if you're from a community that has previously not had access, or you've personally been knocked back quite a few times, you might not feel like you've got what you need, whichever resources, confidence, even information, really, to be able to put your best foot forward for that job, let alone then feel like you're going to be welcome in that space. And so I think it's really paramount that we chat about what those different hurdles are that we're facing, particularly under this question, which is so bloody provocative, and I love Loani for it, is diversity for hire. And we're talking about hiring across the lifespan of a project, and even in production companies, right? So on a project, people often get diversity hired into rooms, for writers' rooms, to craft story and projects. Those people might be kicked off, and other people might be brought on to act in those roles for authenticity, or people might be brought on in attachments to departments because they may or may not have the experience to actually be the key role in that department, so then they're a diversity hire in that regard as well, and across those pipelines. So, with all of that context, I would love to hear from our panellists what their experiences have been on whether they think diversity is actually for hire. Chika, can you kick us off?
Why would you start with me?
Well, you're looking at me so intently.
I'm just listening. I was just listening. Is diversity for hire? That's so rude. I think that in Australia, and I'm always going to speak from the background of acting and writing because that's what I do, not so much producing for now, even though we're at a producers conference. But yeah, I think that Australia is still missing the mark a little bit with when it comes to diversity. I also think talking about diversity, I personally am very tired of it. I think that we are at a point in 2024 where the steps are there and the support is there and there are blueprints that we can follow, but people just, for some reason, don't really want to do the work because it can be really hard, or it can be breaking systems that have been in place for a really long time. So that doesn't really answer your question.
No.
But
it's a great framework, and Nina's got something to follow on.
Oh no, I was going to say it sort of feels like from a writing perspective, I've been in so many writing rooms where I'm the only not white person, I'm the only queer person, I'm the only person under 40. And it's like so alienating. And it also is this weird thing where you try and pitch ideas. Like, you're like, what if there was a gay person in this show and then like 4 old white guys just go, but I'm not gay, so I'm not going to make that character do that. And it's sort of, it's like, it's the gatekeeping sort of comes from like this internal bias or this like thing where they go, well, that's not my experience. And it's like, yeah, but your experience isn't the world's experience. And I think that sort of perspective makes staffing really hard. It gatekeeps and it clouds this whole industry. And I was going to say something that connected to your statement, which has gone out my brain completely right now. But it is this thing, I think, which the gatekeepers to this industry are still very white, still very male. Like, we have a lot of shows that are like, we love women, they're forward creatives. And then you just look at like all the executive producers and the director and you're like, oh, cool, it's just another white man. Like, I think, yeah, I don't know, diversity does still feel very much for hire, I think.
I think we're in a really interesting moment because obviously all of the agencies are like, has to be, diversity is almost imprinted into every application form these days. Like, it has to be, talk about your teams, make sure you're speaking to a diverse range of communities that the population of Australia is made up of, except that where projects seem to be falling over is that people tend to go to the people who have had the most experience in doing those jobs, not necessarily speaking for communities before. And so we end up having shows that are being created by people who aren't necessarily from the communities, who are then needing to backfill authenticity.
I think as well, can I add?
Please.
Sorry. When we talk about diversity, and essentially diversity is for hire because we want to be hired. Like, my HECS debt is enormous. I need to pay that off. But also, how do we set up people for success? And to me, that comes back down to having conversations where we hire individuals, but we also are led by the individual for what they need in order to flourish within their role, in order for production to get the best bang for their buck. And sometimes that can be led by the individual you hire, or you may have to hire additional consultants to consult on behalf of that person, because you can't hire one person to do one job, so Nina is in a writer's room, but expect Nina to wear 3 hats and not get paid for it. So it's just making sure we have great systems and processes, and also making sure we have those sticky conversations where the people at the top, they need to be comfortable not knowing the answers straight away and maybe getting it wrong and not being scared of getting it wrong, because that's okay.
Absolutely, that evolution.
It's like they need to trust us to do our jobs. It's like they don't trust you, so then they'll put you in a room full of like 8 white guys, and you're just like, but just trust me to do my job, and then trust like, I don't know, a bunch of other like cool creatives that are from different backgrounds to do our jobs, and then we'll make something like way more interesting than like that guy that worked on Water Rats like 20 years ago. No offense, it's a great show, but like, and there's heaps of cool people that worked on Water Rats, but it's sort of just like, those people have a certain type of experience and they can't bring authenticity to their roles that they're writing for.
The last room I was in was for a show called Water Rats 20 years ago.
When was it? When you were a fetus?
Yeah,
You look like a baby now.
I think there's also a lot to be said for like intention and building something backwards, which I think often these shows are created, or like the producers are straight white men, and then they have a project that they then try to almost do like a Noah's Ark of diversity, where they're like, okay, well, we need 1 queer person, we need 1 neurodivergent person, we need 1 woman of colour, and they're kind of chosen for identity as opposed to for their, complex creative minds and their ideas. And I think often people can feel that, and they're in the room, but the confidence in their ideas isn't apparent, and the safety and the culture and the relationships surrounding the room aren't apparent. So people feel parachuted into these situations where they're kind of having things extracted from them, as opposed to being given a microphone and giving agency over character, agency over story, given episodes to write so they can get paid well.
Oh my God, the episode thing, the episode gap, sorry, but from being in a writer's room to getting an actual episode is such a big jump. And like, I've been in a bazillion writer's rooms, but I've only ever been given 2 shows that have given me actual episodes. Like, that's insane. Sorry.
Yeah, so the
And
career
difference in
pathways.
pay is huge.
Yeah, the difference in pay, yeah, it's
Like,
crazy.
it's like, can you save to buy a house or can you rent forever? Like, that is
Yeah.
the difference in pay a lot of the time. Yeah.
I'd love to talk about two elements, but maybe we'll talk about safety first. If people are building, and obviously we're going to have people in this room who are in the middle of being like, great, I'm putting a writer's room together, and I have a character who comes from this particular community, and I don't have anyone in my team who is from that community. I'm going to need to get someone into that writer's room to be able to speak to it. How can we give them some advice on what things to consider as they're trying to figure out how to construct this room, who to reach out to, how to find that person? They may or may not know who they want in that room. How can they create a pathway of safety for whoever they hire into that room to bring their best selves to the table?
Get more than one. Like, there's this thing where it's like, we got one this, we got one that. Like, get 2 or 3 of this or 2 or 3 of that. I don't know. It's so alienating to be the one. Like, I was telling these guys earlier, I was hired to write on a show. The main character was like a half Asian girl who loves to smoke bongs. So they called me.
Right.
I'm not joking. They were like, Nina would be great for this show. And she lives with like a grumpy old man or something. Anyway, but the character was like a nurse that was like a gay Indian guy who took care of this old man. And every time they were like, Nina, what do gay Indian guys do? And I was like, I don't know. Like, and they're like, what about the culture of like Diwali? And I was like, you're asking me, dude. Like, that's crazy. And they're like, I bet he loves drag race. And I was like, well, I actually think that like that's a cliche of a gay man. Like, it would be more subversive if he, liked football or whatever. Not that I was pitching that, but I was sort of like, be interesting. And they were like, no, he likes drag race. And it's like, but I shouldn't even have to speak for that. Like, there should be other queer people in that room, not just me. But yeah, I find that's like happened to me so much.
And that's the thing when people are hired for their identity rather than for their body of work, their creativity, their talent, their skills, is that there's an expectation for them to represent this entire community
Yes.
and speak on behalf of that community.
There was another show that I worked on where they had an Indigenous consultant, and she was in the room, and they like asked her, this is just me like spilling the tea right now. That's okay. Thank you for spilling, sis, or whatever they say on the internet. But they had an Indigenous consultant on the show, and then they had this Bible where like a character went through a specific experience, and the consultant was like, I just don't think that would be realistic, and I think that will do more damage to the community. Like, I'm not happy to represent this. And then the next week there was another writer's room for the same show, and that consultant had been replaced with a different consultant that said, I guess that sort of makes sense. And it was like such a obvious, as someone that had been there the whole time, it was sort of like this obvious like replacement until they got the right model minority who said yes. And I think like I think that happens all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. And it's also this thing where you're like, well, I want to get hired, so I do sort of want to say yes to this terrible idea. Like, you're like, do I betray everything I believe in, or do I, work with this company again? And it's not a nice compromise to be making.
Because I think that's the reality of that people who come from diverse backgrounds really we reckon within ourselves. We feel like we need to be palatable in order to stay in the room, in order to get the jobs. And so in those rooms, we feel like if we're too outspoken, if we're almost too authentic, as a person with disability, coming from the disability community, when we talk about diversity, just to be frank, we're not even always on the list. Like, I was stoked to be invited on this panel as somebody with disability. So I feel like often I need to be the good little disabled girl and not be too tricky and not ask for too many adjustments, because so often if somebody discloses disability, because it can be non-visible, we lose the job. We're too hard. It's too expensive. And that's not the case. We're not too expensive. Adjustments don't cost that much money in the scheme of a wider budget. On average, they cost $500, and that can be covered by the government. But again, it comes back to bias. It comes back to misconceptions, and it really creates this environment where people are hired to be authentic, but then we feel like we can't be authentic.
And what would make it easier to be authentic?
For me, I think it would be, in my experiences, I've had amazing experiences where production will sit down with me and be like, okay, great, so you're disabled, cool. What do you need to do a good job? And it sounds so basic, but that simple conversation means the world. Because my access needs, I'm very lucky. I just need a chair to sit down on between camera setups. And when, filmmaking is a waiting game, there's a lot of waiting around. I need to conserve my energy, so I need to sit down. And I need a railing attached to stairs or platforms that I'm on. So it's very basic. But if people respond to that in a way that is like, okay, great, awesome, we'll make sure that happens. That's awesome. But often I've gone to other jobs where I've had that exact conversation. And then communication throughout production, because again, we're very small cogs in very big wheels, that's the name of the game, that information is lost. So my needs aren't addressed, and I don't do a good job. Or I still do a good job, because you know what?
Because you're consummate professional, but you could do a better job.
I could do a better job, and they could, again, get their most money out of me, and I could soar.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What is it, like a chair? Like, how hard is it to get a chair? Like,
Surprisingly hard, apparently.
the director gets a chair in front of the split. Just kick them out. Like, sorry, no, the director is very important. Or like the creative producer or whatever, those people with chairs at the back of monitors. Get like it's a chair.
I think also with authenticity and being able to do your best work is not feeling like you're there as a tokenistic player. So, when it's not quite something I can articulate. It's just, for me, it's often a feeling when I get into a room and I feel that I've been hired with intention, and, you make an offer and people aren't being combative or, whatever. Like
Deadly silence.
Yeah, I feel like I am in a safe enough environment to offer more honest experiences and more honest and authentic offers. Yeah, it's not really like a step-by-step thing, but just like be a good person and hire people with intention.
Yeah, like what Sam was saying, like hire people for their skill and for their talent, and their personality and lived experience and ideas will come with that, and celebrate all of it. Like three-dimensional humans can offer a lot. Was there anything more that you wanted to add to that, Sam?
Just that I can't represent all white gay men who lost their hair in their 20s,
Not a monolith.
We're a diverse group.
I would love to talk about consultants and the place of consultants within this equation, and staying in productions at the moment, because it feels like there's a way that consultants can be really valuable, and there's a way that consultants can be, yet again, ticking a box. Can we talk about some experience where you've worked with consultants and it has been really valuable to have those people as part of the teams, and you've felt like there has been a genuine interaction?
On Latecomers, we had a scene with a sex worker, and so we hired Tilly Lawless, who is a prominent sex worker, as a consultant, and I felt like that was pretty valuable, but that was sort of because there was just one scene, I guess, and we wanted to get it like exactly correct.
I have to say, the authenticity of that scene was incredible. That was a representation of sex work on screen that I hadn't seen in that detail, which I thought was really wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Shout out to Tilly Lawless for all her work on that show. But yeah, that was something that we thought was really important. And that was just for one scene. Like, I think because we were talking about like a lot of different, I don't know how to describe it, like a lot of tricky sexual interactions, I'd say. So we just wanted to get everything right so that so we were able to be honest with our storytelling.
But that would almost be different if the whole show was about sex work, right? Like,
Yeah, that's true.
like if the show was about sex work, you'd get her in the room, I guess. But when it's like, yeah.
I'm judging by the silence from the rest of the panelists that there haven't necessarily been great experiences where people have worked with consultants on projects. So can we talk about what an ideal scenario might look like if you were invited to join a writer's room? would you want a consultant being on that project alongside you?
I've just talked so much. I don't know if I think ideally you wouldn't have to have a consultant because that person would be a writer on the show. Ideally, that person would be a writer from that representation of background, and they would get a writing credit and they would get to work on the show in a writing capacity. And if they were too green to do that, they would be like nurtured or mentored by someone else and put in a pair and would get to co-write an episode. Like Kim Ho got to co-write an episode, I think their first episode of The Newsreader, and it was like a beautiful episode and it won an award. Like, that show is phenomenal, but it's because, you know, Michael Lucas gave this chance to like a young writer. I know Mickey as well, like the Mickey vs. the World producers, they like really prioritize boosting young writers, and if someone hadn't had an episode before, they paired people together, I think. But yeah, I think that like ideally, if you're building a show, you want a person's DNA in that show that is from the correct background. You shouldn't just be like bringing in one person to be like, is this right? Like, can you put the little green tick on it to say that like, you know, a half Japanese queer lady worked on this show? Like, you shouldn't have that. You should have that person be writing themselves. And that's where it comes down to trust, I think.
And if you're looking for that person to attach to the show that you've already got on your slate, then maybe it's not a show that should be on your slate.
Yeah, or maybe you should just be willing to like open your mind and share that credit.
Yeah.
Like maybe you did come up with that concept, but you do want someone to write it with you, and that you should collaborate on that. Like, it will be a better product if you do.
I also think the real success of consultants, if you were to use consultants, would be to use them as early as possible. So in the, like, just the basic development stage before you go into writer's room. So kind of that legwork is already done of those big ideas, or, you know, we're writing a scene about, you know, a scene with a sex worker in it. Is there anything we need to be mindful of? Instead of just shoehorning consultants in within the process of a writer's room or even within shooting, it's almost too late then. So
yeah, getting consultants in when you just want them to approve what's already been written is really problematic. What I was wondering was, would you want someone from the authentic background to be writing and then also have a consultant, so you have multiple perspectives of the same community? Would that be something that, obviously we don't have infinite development budgets, but if it's integral to the show, is this something that we should be fighting for?
Yeah, I think so, because even with the writer and with the consultant, you have two different points of view. So the more points of view you have, the richer the work inherently becomes, because it's just showcasing a diversity of experience.
I'd love to chat about the place of initiatives. There are lots of initiatives going around the industry in different ways. Do you feel like, have you participated in any that have been useful? Do you have any feedback on any that could be great for people potentially building initiatives for the future? Yes, that would be excellent to answer.
Oh, no, I talked too much. You go for it.
Yeah, I've participated in a few initiatives, and super blessed for them to actually go somewhere. And I think that comes down to the collaborators really wanting, like genuinely wanting change and genuinely wanting to upskill people so that we have a more, colourful industry and we have more interesting stories on screen. An example would be the Afters Talent Camp, which I did both the state and the national talent camp. And from that, one of my projects got optioned. Because the people at the production company were just really keen to see another representation of Australia on screen. So yeah, I think some of them can be great, but the ones that are, we have X amount of money to spend and we need to do this and it feels like a task and it feels tokenistic and it ends nowhere, those are a bit problematic. So it kind of varies from person to person, initiative to initiative.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I'm like a huge fan of the grant system. I think I just got really good at writing grants really early, and I've gotten heaps of money from Screen Australia, so thank you, appreciate it. You've built my entire career.
Those taxpayer dollars are going to good use.
Thank you. But hopefully I've been making good enough stuff. Anyway, whatever. So I've gotten the Fresh Blood, ABC Fresh Blood grant has been really instrumental to my career. And that was, I think they give you like nothing. They give you like $15,000 to make 3 5-minute episodes, which at the time I was like, oh my God, this is so much money. And then after we'd hired a camera, I was like, this is no money at all. Like, it's so expensive to make film. But yeah, basically me and my friends just kind of worked for free and made the 3 5-minute ones. And then we went on to make, the half-hour pilot, where we got $95,000, which was so much more money, but still, like, in terms of industry standard, is like chump change, which you find out later. Like, when you don't come up in the industry, you don't know anything about money, you're just like, wow, that says 1,000 on it. You're just like, that's 3 zeros at the end. And then later you're like, oh, it's film that will get eaten up so quickly. Anyway, but I will say, like, things like SBS Digital Originals, which also, they made Latecomers, that was a really good, I thought that was a really good initiative, because they do really prioritize, like, people of color and people with disabilities and people, queer people, and all the initiatives in that, and also Alpha's Talent Camp, which I also did, but I didn't get the thing optioned, but that's okay. But it was really nice to be in, like, a room of, like, I don't know, like, creators of color and people that are from marginalized backgrounds. And it's also cool because then we all, like, make WhatsApp chats and we all talk to each other and we're like, this company's fucked. This company, like, did something racist to my friend. And we're like, but yeah, it's fun. Like, we all know, like, if you do something bad to a person of color, like, they're putting it in a group chat. Like,
Oh yeah,
like,
100%.
nice
We need to talk about that, because there are chats and people talk, and so yeah, there are warning bells going out for people to try and protect them. But then it's interesting, like you said before, if someone's really desperate for an opportunity and it comes up from a company that might have a bad reputation amongst the team, people can make those choices to try and navigate that for themselves, right?
Yeah, and I think most of the time we still kind of take the job. We're just sort of like, okay, just know that this thing happened to someone else, because we don't have enough money to boycott.
No, and we don't.
Companies. We have to make money and also work and also, do stuff.
But what's interesting about that is I wonder how much that company is missing out on then you bringing your full self to the table. Because if you walk in defensive, you're not going to, like, show your vulnerable self within a room, right? Like, that's way too much exposure. So there actually is a lose-lose situation for bad behaviour within the industry. And there's a lot of studies in the States that are showing that authentic representation of communities on screen are absolutely resonating with audience. Like, the numbers are there. It is, like, it's kind of BS that we're even having this conversation. Well, it's absolutely BS that we're having this conversation. But because there is, for the people who are financially minded, and yes, we're in an industry, and yes, people are running businesses, there is an equation that says having authentic voices from the ground up will result in eyeballs, and eyeballs mean money. So the fact that we are still quite behind in this conversation here in Australia is actually just really bad business practice, to be honest.
Yeah, I think also we are in the industry of business and money making, but it's like we are in the entertainment industry. Like, we're literally here to entertain, and that comes from authenticity, and that comes from people with actual lived experience. It's not just, those shows that are really like stock standard and copy and paste probably don't do so well because they don't have the colour, they don't have the life behind them backing it. So yeah, like, everyone remember, we are in the business of entertainment.
And we also, even though we come from really distinct communities and distinct backgrounds, there's so many universal themes that you get from working with diverse people that I think everyone really values, and everyone, like Chika says, finds really entertaining, and that alone is worth the investment because it's exciting, it draws people in. And I think some people assume that if you hire for diversity, you are kind of pigeonholing yourself into one perspective. And it's not the case.
No, absolutely not. And I think it's also worth talking about the communities that even just us 5 people are representing up here on this stage are not small communities. Like, they are epic. Like, we're talking about like large proportions of the population and people who are bored of not seeing authentic representations of their communities up on screen. So the opportunity to tap in with authentic voices and crossover voices, that intersectionality, but then also that shared humanity, just speaks so broadly to the people who are looking for really exciting content. I would love to talk about what happens when a production has done the legwork and they have been really wonderful in the writer's room. Maybe it's a story that's led by someone from the community. They've then brought extra voices in on the writer's room. They've given people amazing opportunities to write scripts. They're getting to production stage. What advice can we talk about? What can we talk about? Advice and hurdles that we can talk about in getting the thing shot, actually working with people on the ground. And I get that we're not all producers here, but there's some producing experience. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, maybe Nina, if you could talk about what happened with latecomers.
Like getting... Well, I wasn't part of the production because I was shooting Deadlock. Sorry, just too successful. But sorry, that was... I'm not... but so I don't know, but I know that SBS was super supportive, and I know that SBS is like... really has been such a champion for diverse voices. Like, I did some writing work on erotic stories, and like everyone, like Sarah's here today, hello. But like, yeah, they really championed individuals writing like that anthology series. And I know that from, like, I was just in the writer's room on that show, but they let me come to set. And that's so rare for like someone that's just in a writer's room to be allowed on set. Like, that's crazy. But yeah, so it was a really, I think, they're a good example of people that are doing it right and supporting their creators, and yeah.
Well, what I'd add to that as well is the process of then hiring crew, and obviously when you're making a production from a community, you want as much input into the representation of that community. So who's heading up your art department? Who's heading up costuming? Who's like, when it's so important to have an authentic representation of that community on screen, you need to be super mindful. Absolutely, you need the technicians who are going to get the jobs done. But ideally, you're finding technicians who have that lived experience of that community to be able to then bring their nuance to their particular craft. It could be even like the gaffers with the lighting tones. It could be... Every single department can infuse authenticity.
The makeup department, please hire more POC in your hair and makeup departments, because you might have an actor come on set and they might have a little bit of attitude and you don't realise it's because they've just, had whiteface done to them in the hair and makeup bus by someone who has been working for 25 years but never done a blackface. So diversity in every single area will make for a better product for your show and whatever you're creating. I think people think it's just like, little things, it doesn't really matter, but like it just has a domino effect on everything. So definitely feel that.
Yeah, it completely does. I worked on this show called Irvie Went to an All-Girls School that had a predominantly South Asian cast, and the grade was so hard, like, people who grade aren't used to grading brown skin, and so it was just like we had to ungreen a lot of stuff, and we didn't have much money, and we finally got there. But it is this thing, like, I think Insecure is a really good example of that, where it's like finally like a show that lights brown skin correctly. Like, and it's not the same as white lighting, like it's not at all.
I just did some work on Total Control. It's the first time I've been in a predominantly brown cast, a black and brown cast, and watching that back was the first time I didn't look jaundiced on screen. Yeah. I think there is often a conversation in this, or a component of this conversation about, but what if people aren't experienced enough to be able to head up those departments? And I think there's a lot of nuance that needs to be talked about here. And it can get a bit tricky. Well, not necessarily tricky, I just think people need to be mindful and need to have a look at things. So I guess there's a conversation around, if you've got someone who has some skill from the community in that particular department, but maybe isn't experienced enough to be an HOD, what relationship will they have with that HOD? Is there going to be a respectful relationship there, that if they have an idea about representation of their community through that department, that they'll actually be listened to? Or is that HOD not necessarily going to be receptive to that conversation? And that's a leadership question. That comes from the producers down, being able to infuse across the whole of the production that everyone's ideas are valid, particularly if it's someone from the community. And then there's also the question around what training opportunities are there for people to be able to upskill and step up, and is there maybe an opportunity for someone to take the next step in that career with support to be able to then ultimately get more people from marginalised or historically excluded communities into HOD positions across production?
I think that's so important, and that's an important part of this whole conversation. Again, speaking selfishly about the disability community, because that's
How dare you?
all I really know. Sorry.
It's only
Otherwise,
20% of the population.
Yeah. Well, if I'm not disabled, I'm just a basic white bitch, so I'm leaning into it. So I think, especially when hiring crew, not just cast, there's a lot of misconceptions about what it means to hire somebody with disability specifically. And people, again, have an assumption that if you have a disability, you can't do a certain role. Because whether it's physical disability or intellectual disability or sensory disability, but I think it's important to remember that, like, we're not stupid. We're not going to apply for a role that we don't think we can fulfill the inherent requirements of. And I find myself having to have that conversation again and again and again, because again, people are led by their bias. If you have disability, you can't do it. Sorry, it's too hard, it's too expensive. But we've invested in a career, we've invested in training, and I think that speaks for every underrepresented community. So, yeah, listen, believe us when we say we can do it.
And have conversations.
And also mentorship. I think mentorship is not, I mean, we have, secondments and attachments and things like that, but what can we do beyond that? Like, can we, at the head of a production, budget for, $200, and that's 3 one-on-one sessions with the person who's more experienced and the person that's less experienced, and just setting things up like that. It's really amazing what those 3 sessions could do to just change the way that someone practices. We should just have more of that in Australia within productions. I seek out mentors a lot just on my own, but it would be great to for productions to just do that from the start, so that people feel like they are getting the confidence to be able to then maybe go on to the next project and do that by themselves.
Because those mentors will then learn from mentoring individuals, and then they will take those learnings into their practice day to day, and then almost diversity and inclusion will become more universal because it's top up and top down as well. And that's a big win for everyone.
Absolutely. Mentorship is always multi-directional, and when it's not safe. Everyone's always learning from each other, regardless of what your experience level is. And I think it's really important. It's something that we talked about in the room, that just because someone isn't necessarily as experienced in the physical job or the technical job that they're doing doesn't mean they're not experienced, because they've got all of their life experience of their community, of how their lives have gone, whatever's happened across it. What they're bringing to the table is just as important. And I think it's also equally as important to talk about investment and who's got what at stake. So if there's often a conversation that production companies are taking the risk with projects in maybe bringing on a project from a more emerging creator, from a community, to be able to talk about, but the production company is risking money and investment into this project, their time, their resources, all of that. And often it's the lens that's the only thing that's at risk in this particular scenario, whereas it isn't factored in that the person is risking their relationships, representation of their community, that burden of representation, possible exposing the dirty laundry of their families, inside secrets that might come and be. So if they're not handled well, they risk losing their communities, which is so much bigger than losing a couple of $1,000s and maybe 20 hours or whatever. And that we don't have as much as of an equation to recognise that. And we're only just starting to have the equation that social media eyeballs account to experience, let alone now this other, and that risk. And now we're only just having this conversation about this one as well, which I think is just as important. Totally sidetracked and I've lost my train of thought.
Oh no,
Save me.
I wanted to come back to that risk thing. So I've done some work in America, and they were like, the difference between America and Australia is like Americans will approach like a young creative who's inexperienced and go, how will you make me rich? Like, your idea is so singular and so original and no one's ever heard it. How are you going to blow the doors open and make me the richest guy ever? Like, how will you make the next I Made Australia, the next Fleabag? Like, they have this attitude of like excitement and blah, blah, blah. And Australian people apparently are like, how will you make me broke? Which is like, I'm going to take a risk on this person, and how are you going to blow my money and take my career? And I think that that's why a lot of companies here are risk averse, and they hire, and like, again, love Water Outs, but it is like the same 5 guys. It's the same 5 guys, and they're in every room, and I love them, and they do really good work, but they're also getting lots of work, so they don't need to always be in every room. But yeah, like, I just think there is this sort of thing where it's like we have to, I don't know. That said, like, mentorship is also a really good way to circumnavigate. And I will say, like, something that I really loved about Latecomers is that we had, at every step of development, a much more seasoned writer as our script editor or as our story producer. So at the ground level, our very first writer room, we had Vanessa Alexander was with us for 2 days from The Great, and she just like came in and she was like, you need an eternal question, you need a turning point here, and basically just laid the foundation really solidly. And then after that, we had Claire Phillips advising us, who was the showrunner on RFDS. And then after that, we had Blake Ashford, who is a genius. I love Blake Ashford. I think he worked on Water Rats, and I love him so much. This is like my version of being like, I have friends that aren't white. I have male friends that worked on Water Rats. But he was someone that when he gave notes as well, they weren't absolutist. Like, lots of head writers, like, they'll write to you and be like, this is shit, I don't get it. Not like that, but like, sort of like that. Yeah. And then Blake was like, perhaps this, like, have you tried thinking about this? How can you make this moment more interesting? How can you make this writing more exciting? And it was like questions that felt nurturing and leading and made us excited to write, other than being like, this would never happen. I don't think this, like, I've gotten notes before where it's like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm like, yeah, because you're an idiot. But there was, oh my God, I got this one note from, I'm not going to say who it's from, but...
Say it, tell us.
But,
tell us who.
No, you'll probably, yeah, whatever. There was one joke in the script and he was just like, I don't get this joke. I don't, and every time we sent his script, he was like, I don't understand it. And then we shot it and he saw the clip and he was like, that joke's amazing. And like hadn't clocked that at every point he said it's the same joke. Yeah, so it was just like, anyway, whatever. That's just me airing a gripe. That person's not employed in a position of power anymore for reasons, but I'm not going to say who it is. But like, yeah, that person notoriously also gave awful, horrible notes and would be up at like 4 a.m. like screaming at people on the phone.
Oh, no.
So yeah, I'm actually whatever.
Actually, can I riff off that for a split second? Because I did a panel yesterday, which some people were maybe at and maybe not, looking at the priorities for this year, and it was in partnership with Screenwell, and so we were talking a lot about mental health and safety, and there are a couple of pieces of legislation that I think are actually going to be really important in this conversation. And one that went through is the need, and this is breaking it down a little bit, but the responsibility of everyone, particularly the people in power, to ensure everyone's psycho-safety. And that this is now legislated. So it is law that all work environments need to be psychologically safe for everyone at every point. It's not like, oh yeah, but that's a side conversation in a private room. They can have that, I don't know, sexist, racist, homophobic, ableist joke, and it won't affect the actual work they're doing. No, that does, and that needs to be shut down. And that is everyone's responsibility. And that if anyone feels that that's happening, let alone witnesses, that needs to be taken seriously and dealt with immediately. This is now legislation that everyone in a position, well, anyone employed actually needs to be entirely aware of. And it's going to be interesting to see how that rolls out across the industry, because for sure, absolutely, sometimes people accidentally say things that they don't realise are offensive, for sure. That can happen, and sometimes people are just blatantly assholes. So,
oh my God, I have the funniest story about this. So I've just been in so many writers' rooms, and they're all crazy. Like I met this like fancy director, and they were like, they were like, "Are you Eurasian?" And then they were like, "Oh my God, I love Eurasians." And I was like, that's a crazy thing to say because they were white. And then later and I looked so uncomfortable in that moment that one of the producers like pulled me aside and they were like, "Oh Nina, I know that comment that director said like made you uncomfortable, but it's okay because they grew up in Singapore." And I was like, I don't think that is okay. I think that you should have told them to not say that.
Yeah.
It was funny because there was another Indigenous writer on the show, and we would have this joke, like, it would be if that director was like, "Oh my God, I love Indigenous people." Like, it would be such a vastly different, I don't know. Anyway, it was just, but it's like people do that stuff all the time in writers' rooms, and it's a funny story now, but at the time I was like, this is fucked, and this experience is not going to be great.
And then there's a direct domino effect of that as well, which costs the production. Because if you feel uncomfortable around that person, are you going to be giving 100%, or are you going to be distracted?
Probably not, but I also I think that because I've just come up in writers' rooms where you just kind of get treated like that on a regular basis, I'm kind of okay with it now, which is not good, which is bad, and no one should stand for that. But yeah, I don't know. I think. Yeah, you just kind of get to this point where you're like, well, it's not going to help me if I get upset about it, and then you just get over it, which you shouldn't have to do.
I just want to pick up on something that you said in your story where the producer pulled you aside instead of the person, which happens so often across the industry where something happens that is racist or homophobic or just inherently problematic, and we as the victim are the ones that are having to cater to the perpetrator.
It's okay, it's fine.
Which doesn't make sense, and it's really it makes us really tired. It makes us feel very unseen, and I think more people up top need to find the confidence to go and talk to that person rather than coming to talk to us, to make sure that we create a safe space for the person who made it unsafe for us.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this set-up conversation with producers that they have with us as creatives is so important. I know it sounds so basic and so easy,
but it's so
establishing that benchmark, hey, this production is going to do everything it needs to do to support you to do your best work. If something like that happens, come to me, and I'll be and I'll make sure that whatever needs to happen will happen. But hopefully, best practice is the producer or whoever's in charge is on the front foot, so we don't have to do that emotional labour and flag everything that hits the fan. They see it when they can, and they get it, and it's sorted.
But the irony of it is, I don't think I've ever signed up to a production where it's we are going to be a racist, homophobic, ableist, problematic set, and you just have to deal with it. That's never on a call sheet. That would be great. Just be up front. If that's how you want to run your show, just be up front with it. But every time it's
I wish they were. I wish they were. I'd probably still do it because I need money.
That'd be but every single call sheet, every single contract is we won't tolerate this, that, and the other. Then don't tolerate it. Literally don't.
I feel like, sorry.
Sorry, you guys.
I feel like the language and approach to safety and that kind of stuff in writers' rooms is often adjacent to Are You OK Day, where it's we have cupcakes at 11. Are you okay? Is this feeling safe? Just, yeah? Good. And then and that's kind of, it's this kind of, it's Are You OK Day, except cultural in a writer's room, and it doesn't go much beyond a logo a lot of the time.
Bridie, did you want to say?
I was just going to say, sometimes as well, if something does happen and something gets flagged, it's important that leaders get better at sitting in the shit of being in the wrong. I think if something bad goes wrong, somebody's initial reaction is oh, but I'm not racist, but I'm not homophobic, but I'm not ableist, so it's not on me because my intentions weren't malicious. No one's intentions are ever malicious. And we sometimes naive. But I think we need to get better at being uncomfortable. We need to get better at being uncomfortable and going, okay, this has happened, what are we going to do about it? And move on from there.
Absolutely. I will come out for audience questions, so if you have any, just get ready to ask. But I wanted to... Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say, there's a lot of white people here. You're the good ones. Thank you for coming. But like so many white people I know, because on Screen Australia there is a diversity form where you have to be like, there's a person of colour in this department, there's this, and you have to list it. And so many white people I know are like, this is an affront to who I am. This is an affront to me. This is an attack on me. And it's like, no, you just calm down. It's just a form. It's just a little form. And you don't have to tick everything. You just have to tell your story. But it's like this weird thing where they sort of have everything is a perceived slight to them now, it feels like. Yeah, anyway, sorry, that's all I wanted to say.
Absolutely. No, I was going to just draw some dots a little bit, or connect some dots, I guess I should say, between what you were saying, Nina, earlier around the different in perspective, that in the States, people are often looking for the opportunity, but in Australia, we're often looking for the mitigating risk. And it feels like that is a similar mindset that comes up every single time there's a sticky situation. Everyone's just like, oh my God, how do I put this fire out? I've got to put this fire out, I've got to put this fire out. As opposed to, what is the opportunity here? What's the learning opportunity? What doorways can we open? Which uncomfortable conversations can we have? What growth can be achieved here? How can we actually use this tricky, sticky situation to build a stronger sense of trust, to build a bigger set of allyship across this production, for people to actually feel safer, so they can actually bring even more of themselves. And that being,
I was going to say, I agree.
Yeah. Does anyone have, yes, thank you. We might just grab a mic for you because we're in a slightly larger room.
Thank you for everything that you mob have shared. I think like there's probably a lot of us in the audience that are really eager to like hard agree with everything you're saying. It's really this feedback's really, I can't hear myself. I'm just feeling a little bit, after hearing all of this, not sad, but just because everything that you mob have been saying, I also feel like we've been saying this for so long and people are aware. Yeah. Like they do know this stuff, and there's a lot of people that should be in this room right now hearing this that are not, and people that I've, not to call people out, but just like people where I'm like, your career has directly benefited off of our stories. You've also not created safe spaces for us in the meantime, and why aren't you in this room listening? Mm-hmm. So it's this thing that I'm feeling at the moment where I'm like, okay, but people do know this, and there needs to be less like what you're talking about with the producer taking you aside and making you responsible for the slight, for the, low-key racist attack against you. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, like, do you sometimes feel like sometimes it's just a bit of a void and we're just saying this in the same kind of circles all the time, and how do we kind of break out of that void in a way that's not like solely our responsibility as well?
100%. It's a huge question and an incredibly valid one. Like, we are speaking in an echo chamber. You're here because you care, and you care, which means you're probably doing good things. And it might be that you've taken one piece of information out of this that might help you do an even better thing on the next thing. But you're not here because you're the people doing the bad stuff. So you're right. There are lots of people who are stuck in maybe archaic and outdated ways of thinking and behaviour, and we need their behaviours to change. It's a huge question, how to...
Well, Rosie, I was going to throw to you for that question, because you work a lot in policy and structure and the funding systems, and I guess like you are changing things from the inside. Please give us some hope.
Well, what I'd love to acknowledge is that there is a bunch of people who are working across different organisations within the industry who are trying to do the fight from the inside, and where there is an ecosystem of change that's happening. That ecosystem is moving slowly, but it is shifting. Nina may or may not know this, but I was the person who... I was in the seat at Screen Australia when you got the Fresh Blood funding.
Oh, thank you.
I was part of the early conversations in setting up digital originals, because the team at the time at SBS and myself, we were both leaving our jobs. We were like, we need to have a stronger legacy in place so that there can be more a pathway and a pipeline for talent to come through in a respectful way. And the teams that thankfully took over our jobs took it, ran with it, and next leveled it. And the projects that have come through, the careers that have started, the people who have jumped from those short-form projects into high-funded next projects and are now flying is phenomenal. That's not to pat myself on the back. That said that there are some incremental steps that are taking place. More needs to happen. Like, this needs to be on MSG. Like, it needs to, like, just go. Because more needs to take place. So the work that I'm doing at the Gender Matters Task Force is trying to see where best our energy can be placed to be able to make as much change as possible. And my personal theory with the work that I do and that we're doing at the task force is looking at what Band-Aids immediately need to take place so that we can fix something that is happening right now, but Band-Aids aren't enough. What initiatives are taking place that can deliver results within the next 2 years, but that's still not enough. And what systemically are we trying to influence that across a 10-year and generational pipeline is going to have real foundational change. And I'm hoping that the work that I'm doing right now, and I've got task force members in the audience as well, and people that are working across different organisations like Bus Stop Films, are all working on the shoulders of the work that's come before us and the work that will be coming after us as well. All I can say is we just need to keep working together and keep talking and keep pressuring the people in decision-making positions, all of the agencies, all of the major production companies, all of the guilds. Everywhere that there is a policy, we need to be talking to them and making sure that they're listening. And whichever spheres of influence that you're working within, keep this conversation alive and work with good people. Never reward bad behaviour, and I think that happens a lot. Even if it's that person that could get you the money to that thing, if they've got a history of not treating people well, don't work with them, please. Like, just please don't.
Sorry, I'm just like really agreeing with what you're saying, that it's like trying to people please less would also like really establish us from not giving permission to these, systems and opportunities that are ultimately like detrimental to whatever communities we represent as well. So trying to kind of push, try to get art, like the people and the places that we represent also feel like they don't need to people please.
For sure. Whilst acknowledging that there is an absolute friction between having a career in a selective competitive industry and also looking and balancing the weight of responsibility, always speaking truth to power, absolutely, but that weight of responsibility on one person's shoulders, that's crushing. So know who is in your corner, how you can refuel with people as well, where your safe spaces are, who you want to work with, who will actually nourish you is just as important as pushing back when things are not right.
And if there's anyone in the room that has power that works with Rosie, do not cop block her. Let her do the thing.
And maybe some different people would be in the room if there was an anonymous Gossip Girl style Excel spreadsheet that was presented only once a year in this room, and to find out who was about to get.
If we named and shamed, we'd have everyone in the room. We're like, oh, well, so we're going to release the list.
Yeah, it would just be all the white people in the room wondering if they're racist or not. They'd be like, am I on the list? Am I, like, you know how you get play auditions back at theatre and you're like, oh, who's on the list? Is it me? That's what it would be like.
I think it's so funny because I think if anyone's paranoid about something, whether you're the person who actually did the thing that's on that list, if you're paranoid, there's something you've done that you need to atone for. Like there are amends that need to be made, there are apologies that need to be spoken, there's action that needs to be taken.
Hopefully this is a hopeful thing to end on because we're out of time, but I like to think that all of us at some point will become producers or creators or showrunners and be in positions of power where we can staff and we can choose our writing team and we can stack the deck the way we want it. And even though we're all young and no one's taking us seriously yet, I think that I like to think one day we will be fucking showrunners, and then that's when we will be able to make the change that we want to see.
Hear to that.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. Thank our panelists. That was amazing. Thank you, Screen Forever. And maybe next year this panel's going to be called Naming and Shaming.
Come see me after a few drinks tonight.